Hey guys, what's up? We are discussing a lot of important evergreen social issues, and in the previous course, I have discussed women empowerment. What is the definition of women empowerment, gender sensitization, everything I have discussed. And in this particular lesson, we will discuss the issue of globalization. Globalization is becoming a very big issue. It is going on for last 30-40 years, and now it is taking a huge pace, rapid advancement, where Indians are traveling to all the countries in the world, and all the other countries people are traveling in each other's country, and the homogenization is happening. Multinational corporations are making sure that you have enough ample opportunities. You have Amazon here, you have Uber here. All these are example of globalization. If you go to USA, there is no culture shock anymore. You watch the same TV series, see the same movies. Netflix is here, everything is here. So let us talk about globalization, and overall course structure will discuss what is globalization. We'll trace the history of globalization. We'll see the role of the Bretton Woods institutions, factors which are responsible for globalization, impact of globalization, threats emerging due to globalization, myth about the globalization, and finally we will cover the future of the globalization. Okay, so get set ready, and if an essay comes, this course is your one stop destination. So we'll cover what is globalization now. So what do you mean by globalization? Globe means earth, ization means when everything is homogenized. So globalization is a very complex issue, partly because economy is only one part of it. Globalization is a greater global closeness, and that is globalization is cultural, social, political, as well as economic. So Amartya Sen is saying that economic globalization is just one part of globalization. It is more about if you are watching the same movies or not, if you know that democracy is there in USA and India, the society is similar, politics similar, economy is similar. There is a greater global closeness. You know what is happening in America. Americans know what is happening in India. So it is much more than economic globalization, wherein the multinational corporations can function in India and US at the same time. It is social, political, as well as economic. So it is a very diverse phenomenon which relates to a multilateral political world and to increase of the cultural objects and markets between the countries. In other words, globalization is primarily an economic process of integration that has social and cultural aspects. It involves lots of goods and services and the economic resources of capital, technology, and data. So in 2000, IMF identified four basic aspects of globalization. Please remember it: trade and transactions. It is second is capital and investment movements. Third is migration and movement of people. Fourth is dissemination of knowledge. However, for a better understanding, we will discuss it under the three categories: economic globalization, cultural, political, and finally, we will start with the economic globalization. So, we will discuss economic globalization, cultural globalization, and the third one is the political globalization. Amartya Sen is talking about social and cultural. So, we have combined these two together in our lesson. So, economic globalization is basically the process of increasing economic integration between countries, leading to the emergence of a global marketplace, single world market, etc. Now, obviously, what it does is it increases the economic interdependence of national economies across the world. Okay, and through a rapid increase in cross-border movement of goods, services, technology, and capital, and depending on the paradigm, it can be viewed as either as a positive or a negative phenomenon. So that is your economic globalization. Some people consider it positive, some people consider it negative. Depends on which side you are. If you are getting benefit from it, then definitely it is positive. If you are not getting benefit from it, it can be considered as negative. Now, economic globalization comprises of: first is globalization of production. What do you mean by globalization of production? For example, it refers to the goods, services. You obtain them from a particular source from different locations around the world to benefit from difference in cost and quality. Let me talk about iPhone. iPhone is basically designed by the people sitting in California. That is 100% correct. Parts can be sourced from different parts of the world. Samsung is sitting in South Korea, so they take screen from Samsung, battery from somewhere else. Okay, then they go to Chinese factory for assembling, then they come back to various markets in India, etc., and finally get sold. So there's proper globalization of production. Whichever part is cheaper in any part of the world, you source it from there. Second is globalization of markets. So globalization of markets is defined as the union of different and separate markets into massive global marketplace. For example, Chinese company like Xiaomi is the India's largest mobile manufacturing seller. Do you know that? We have the largest number of mobile manufacturing in India at this point is from Xiaomi. Okay, and it is a Chinese company. So just to give you context, economic globalization also includes a lot of competition. For example, Ola will face competition from Uber, Flipkart will face competition from Amazon, etc. Then there is technology, there is corporations, industries. You will find all these components of globalization of markets. Cultural globalization is like transmission of ideas, meanings, values around the world, and which extend and intensify social relations. People in India are sitting listening to jazz, they are listening to blues, they are listening to the country music of USA. When I was in USA, one girl who was white and blonde, she was listening to Shreya Ghoshal's music. This is typical example of cultural globalization. We watch their TV series, they watch our movies, and this process is marked by the common consumption of cultures that have been diffused by the internet like YouTube, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hotstar, popular culture media, international travel, etc. Now the circulation of culture will enable individual to take part or partake in extended social relations. It will transcend the national and the regional borders. And this creation and expansion of such social relation is not merely observed on a material level, it is a much higher at a spiritual level. It involves formation of shared norms, rules, knowledge with which people associate their individual and collective cultural identities. Very, very important lines for essays. Now, religions were among the earliest cultural elements to globalize, and they used to spread by force, migration, evangelism, imperialist traders. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and recently like Mormonism, they are among those religions which have taken root and influenced a lot of endemic cultures and in places much much far from their origins. Sports is another element, like football connects everyone, cricket connects everyone. For example, modern Olympic Games connects everyone from around the world. FIFA World Cup is considered as the most widely viewed and following sport event in the world. It connects someone sitting in Bangalore to someone sitting in Nairobi, to someone sitting in Cape Town, to someone sitting in International Space Station, to someone sitting in Antarctica, etc. Similarly, music has played an important role in economic and cultural development during globalization. Like genres such as jazz and reggae, they began locally, now they are international phenomenon. And similarly, Pandit Ravi Shankar is also heard throughout the world. Political globalization like Inter-European Union, WTO, it reduces the importance of nation states. G8, ICC, they can replace or extend national functions. And some people are the citizens of multiple nation state, dual citizenship, multiple citizenships. Okay, people are having citizenship of different countries. And interestingly, NGOs influence public policy across the national boundaries, including humanitarian aid, developmental efforts. And scholars also occasionally discuss other dimension of globalization like environmental globalization, like Paris Climate Deal, Montreal Protocol, where everybody is coordinating, military globalization like NATO, etc. So we'll continue the course. Hey guys, what's up? So we are discussing a very important course of globalization, and I'll cover a lot of important evergreen social issues which UPSC keen on us. It's very keen on asking from last 10 years, and for next 10 years they'll keep on asking these issues: women empowerment, globalization, etc. Weaker section of the society, OBCs, SCs, STs. We'll cover it in the later courses. Right now we have discovered what is globalization and we have discussed the definition. Now we'll move to the part 2, where we will try to trace the history of the globalization. How did globalization came into being, which are the principal players which are involved behind the globalization, and role of Bretton Woods institutions, okay, World Bank and IMF. And what is Bretton Woods? Is it a place, is it a company, is it a person, who is it? Everything like this, it should be, inquisitiveness should always be there inside you, otherwise you will not be able to crack UPSC. So let us trace the history of globalization. As I've already told you, it is going on majorly by last 20 years. But if you consider like Silk Route, Alexander the Great, all these people are doing globalization. Even Indus Valley civilization to certain extent, trading with Mesopotamia, etc. So globalization, also called as internationalization, it is definitely not a new phenomenon by any stretch of imagination. It is going on from last 2, 3,000, 4,000 years. So many scholars place the origin of globalization in modern times. Obviously, the scale is much different here. You did not go to USA 2000 years ago. There was no one in USA except some Native American Indian. Other try to trace it long before the European age of discovery, which was in 14th, 15th century, and voyages to the New World, and some even to the 3rd millennia BC, but not before that. So they trace, as I've already told you, link between the Indus Valley civilization and the Sumerian civilization. This is that can be considered. So the trace between the Indus Valley civilization and the Sumerian civilization, it can be considered as the first point, and thereafter trade had taken place among various countries, including Greece, Egypt, Roman Empire, and so on and so forth. So all these are part of globalization. Like Roman used to come to India and they used to take a lot of spices apart from other imports, and they used to give gold for that. That is why spice is also called as black gold. Now it was in regard to the need for trade, because there are certain resources which are available in one particular region while they have to import the other, and they have to export their own for the import purposes, and that various trade routes were there. Silk route is one such example. So Chinese silk traders used to take this route. However, globalization was definitely interrupted in the first half of the 20th century. That I will 100% agree. There was a huge wave of protectionism, there was aggressive nationalism, and it led to World War One, World War Two. It led to global economic depression. Everybody wanted to be German, French, British national, American. Nobody wanted to be a global citizen. The nation was it. Nation was the highest form of loyalty, and service to the nation was considered the highest form of pride and attainment which one possibly can get. As I told you, from last 30 to 40 years in 1980s, that is when the actual globalization started. It began to be used more commonly in the 1980s, reflecting the technological advances that made it much easier and quicker to complete the international transactions. It is both the trade as well as the financial flows. So both of this are included. The Industrial Revolution happened in the 19th century. Obviously, it started way earlier in 18th century, but it began like in full pace on the 19th century. It was one of the major periods in the history of globalization. Because of Industrial Revolution, there was a significant increase in the quantity and the quality of products, because earlier human used to make them, and it was obviously it's not possible to match the machines. And once the mechanization started, the industrial revolution started, it led to increase in the quantity of quality of products. It led to higher exports, better trade relations, and to maintain them, globalization becomes a prerequisite. Now there was a lot of colonialism which started in the 19th century. There was a lot of imperialism. It further contributed to the trade, and with the World War One, the period referred to as pre-globalization came to an end. So this is an important point. Hence, the globalization originated in the modern age towards the end of World War II, and it really picked up in last 40 years since the 1980s. The major reason is the result of development and a lot of connectivity. So what followed this connectivity was exchange across the borders in terms of trade, ideas, culture, etc. And after the war, the leaders of the world decided to bring down the barriers, promote trade relations among various countries across the globe. Moreover, with countries like India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, they gained independence just after World War II. The need for economic cooperation among nations become essential, right? Because no nation is self-sufficient. We need some goods, some services, some products from outside. No nation is self-sufficient in today's age. Now, role of Bretton Woods institution is obviously there. So first of all, you need to know what are Bretton Woods institutions. So the two institutions, IMF and World Bank, they came about in Bretton Woods conference in 1944. That is why they are called as Bretton Woods institutions. It is a place in US. Okay. So it has an important role to play in making globalization work better. And they were created in 1944 to help restore and sustain the benefits of global integration. What did they do? How do they sustain it? By promoting international economic cooperation. So it is said that if two countries are heavily dependent on each other economically, there is a very less chance that there can be war between these two countries. Now, today IMF and World Bank are separate completely. They pursue their respective mandates, which is the common objective of broadly shared prosperity. World Bank is basically, it concentrates on the long term investment projects, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, building of the institutions, social, environmental, poverty issues, etc. IMF is basically focusing on the functioning of the international monetary systems and on promoting sound macroeconomic policies as a precondition for sustained economic growth, because without sound macroeconomic policies, sustained growth is impossible to achieve. Now, the IMF seeks to mitigate. There is obviously negative effects of globalization, right? Many people don't like it, takes away job, etc. But the negative impacts, the IMF wants globalization to happen, so it tends to mitigate the negative effects in the following ways. It ensures the stability of the international financial system, and by helping individual countries take the advantage of the investment opportunities which is offered by the international capital markets, while reducing their vulnerability to adverse shocks or changes in investor sentiment. IMF believes that the economic growth is the only way to improve living standards in developing countries, and this is the best achieved through globalization. However, IMF also recognizes that while much progress has been made in making globalization work better, much work still lies ahead. This can be said for anything in the entire world. Just say any statement which follows is by this. So, thank you for watching this lesson. Hey guys, what's up? So, we continue the discussion on globalization. This is the part 3. Here we'll discuss the various factors which are responsible for globalization, impact of globalization, positives of globalization, and negatives of globalization. So, what are the factors responsible for globalization? So, primarily it is possible because of various scientific inventions, industrial revolution, a lot of development that has worked to interconnect the nation in every aspects. So, there are two major factors which are responsible. First is transportation, like the steam locomotive engine, jet engine, container ships are some of the advances in the means of transport from which import and export can be made really cheap. And today modern aviation, like you can go from India to USA in 16 hours. Just that is how long it takes. It has made long distance transportation very quick and very affordable. The second part is communication using WhatsApp calls. You can call anywhere in the world, entire world, audio call, video call. You don't even need a SIM card. Now there is rise of telegraph in the 19th century and 20th century. Its modern offspring, the internet, mobile phones. They show the development in telecom infrastructure. Internet has been really instrumental in connecting people across various geography. Even if you can connect to people in Pakistan, which was virtually impossible 20 years ago. Now you can talk to any Pakistani on Facebook, WhatsApp, using Instagram, Twitter, and many more social networking services. Okay, and all of the improvements we enjoy in the modern era, they have been the major factors in the globalization, and they have generated further interdependence of economic and cultural activities. Now, what is the impact of globalization? So, globalization processes basically they affect and in turn are affected by business and work organization, economic, socio-cultural resources, natural environment. Now, globalization obviously has led to the growing competition across the globe. There is no doubt about it. There are a lot of beneficial aspects that increase production and efficiency, and competition, increasing market space. It can lead to specialization. Obviously, it improves the division of labor. You can better plan your resources, you can better allocate them. And once you have economies of scale, so let's say the bulk production takes 50 rupees if you make 500 pieces, but if you make 5 million pieces it might take only 10 rupees. If you make 10 million pieces it might take only 5 rupees. That's how the economies of scale works. So it has like huge effects on cost and prices, and it provides a stronger impetus for economic growth. It really helps. On the other hand, there are a lot of costs of globalization as well. It can lead to conflict at various levels. For example, US engineers does not like that an Indian guy comes and take their job. Okay, nobody will like that. Similarly, US citizens don't like that Mexican comes and take their job. So that is why Donald Trump won the election based on the wave of anti-immigration. Especially since many of these beneficiaries of globalization have been the richer countries of OECD. So weaker countries don't like that rich countries come and get their technology and defeat their industries. So the net result has not been convergence but rather divergence of the incomes worldwide. So poor are getting poorer, rich are getting richer. Rapid growth economy like Asia joining richer nations, but with poor nations of Africa Latin America, South Asia, even in East and Central Europe, they are slipping further behind. This experience basically demonstrates that integration into the global economy can bring major advantages for developing countries provided they have the right policies, tools, and necessary willpower to basically take the advantage of it. You can also, like, let's see the overall advantages and disadvantages of globalization so everything becomes clearer. So, the positives, also called the pros or advantages, are so globalization has enriched the world scientifically, culturally, and benefited many people economically as well. This is the statement of Amartya Sen, who is a Nobel laureate from India. So first of all, the markets are better organized. You can get the cheapest stuff possible. If Flipkart is not going, you could go to Amazon. If they are not going to go to Snapdeal. If they are not going to go to ShopClues. Even if they are not going, you can go to Chinese company like AliExpress.com. So, a growing economy, well organized, effectual markets are essential, and a lot of open economies and better trade are coming along. So, with them, you can outsource your products or services. If you want engineering team to be made in India, you can do it sitting in Silicon Valley, and thereby you can improve in quality and save on cost. Okay, and a lower selling price could result in increased demand and affordability, and that's how you can outcompete your competition. But obviously there is increased competition. If let's say there was no globalization, then Ola can easily copy the Uber model and their Uber can't come to India. But now since they can come to India, there will be more choices available, standards would be raised, each producer will be in constant process of improving the product. This will bring down the prices eventually. Third is promotion of commerce and trade. Obviously, it results in a lot of MNCs, multinational corporation, transnational corporation coming and doing inward investment. For example, McDonald's is in India, Domino's is in India, Pizza Hut is in India. None of it is an Indian company. Okay. Fourth is cultural exchange. Obviously, you get to learn about US culture or Western Europe or whatever. So sharing and exchange of ideas happens, experiences happen, values, traditions, lifestyle of people, and people can experience foods, other products which are not previously available in their countries. So tourism also leads to cultural exchanges. Then you have a lot of transnational marriage. Okay, it is between two people from different countries. So in an age of increasing globalization, where a growing number of people have ties to network of people, places across the globe, and rather than to a current geographic location, people are increasingly marrying across the national boundaries. So transnational marriage is a byproduct of the movement and migration of people. So that is a transnational marriage. A lot of it is happening, and more tolerant world is coming along. Don't think that we are intolerant. If you want intolerance, go to the 15th century Europe. Then you will realize what is intolerance. Society in general is becoming more open, tolerant towards each other. People who live in the other parts of the world are now not considered aliens. Okay, human rights can flourish in such environment. Then international education is given. You know something about USA, it has 50 states. Okay, more and more students are seeking higher education in foreign countries, and many international students have overseas study as a stepping stone to permanent citizenship, residency, etc. And foreign students bring a lot of experience with them, and it enriches and it helps the local people also. The institutions goes out of their way to help in immigration and visa policies and procedures. Then global welfare vision is there. So a lot of global philanthropic group like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc. are coming along. So they help in providing immunizations to some of the world's more impoverished but rapidly growing countries. Negative points includes interdependence happens. So for example, if there is crisis in Europe, so that let's say 2008 crisis in US, so it affects everybody. Economic sovereignty is losing out. Everybody is member of EU and Europe. Nobody is safe. Germany is a very powerful economy, but when pigs crash, Germany also got affected. Brexit is affecting the entire world. Then there is a lot of exploitation which happens through transnational corporations, multinational corporations of the local labor. Outsourcing is bad because the jobs are not provided to the population in the country. There is a lot of environmental effect because everybody wants to maximize their profit and they take raw material like anything. Loss of cultural diversity will happen because everybody will become homogeneous eventually. There will be no difference in skin color, religion, taste. So some argue that ultimately it will lead to westernization or Americanization of culture. And finally, there will be increased isolation policies. For example, America is doing under Donald Trump. North Korea is already doing it. It's very difficult for foreigners to enter the country and strictly monitors their activity when they do. And workers are subject to considerable scrutiny, excluded from places and regions that government does not wish them to enter. And citizens cannot freely leave the country also. Thank you. Hey guys, what's up? So we are discussing a very important topic of globalization. In the last lesson, we discussed a lot of pros and cons of globalization and how globalization is coming into effect. And we are continuing the discussion on various important evergreen social issues. And now here we will discuss the threat which is emerging due to globalization. Obviously, there are multinational corporations which overtake the entire government and they virtually run the world, just like British East India Company did to India. And there are a lot of myths about globalization which I will try to eradicate and go away with. Okay, so let us see the part 4, threats emerging due to globalization, myths about globalization. So there are a lot of threats which emerge to globalization. So the term globalization basically means transformation. So it may create some unwanted outcomes that are not good for a particular region and the whole world as well. Obviously, everything has pros and cons. There is no doubt about it that globalization is also a phenomenon which have its own pros and cons. First of all, there are a lot of environmental challenges. Okay, so once you become a multinational corporation, they have only thing which you think about is profit and the increase in the share prices. That is the only thing people think about. They don't care about global warming, cross boundary water pollution, air pollution, overfishing of the ocean. They are all linked with globalization because everybody wants to maximize their production, everybody wants to maximize their profits. Now, that is why it is the biggest concern which emerges from the globalization. Cultural practices like traditional music, etc., will be lost because it is very easy to access the pop music of the West. And basically, globalization can trigger a state of emergency for the preservation of musical heritage. It is already happening. People are listening to the Western music. It is very easy to get it now. YouTube, everybody has the access. Smartphones are cheap from Xiaomi, and internet is provided by Jio. So it is very easy to get songs there. Now, a lot of archivists they attempt to collect, record, or transcribe repertoires before melodies are assimilated or modified. While the local musicians may struggle for authenticity and to preserve the local musical tradition at the same time, so what will happen is eventually when they realize that it is not remunerative enough, so just like Britishers destroyed our artisans because they did not think it was remunerative enough. Similarly, these local performers who are performing their own music, they will tend to discard the traditional instruments and they will tend to pick up those instruments where money is because at the end of the day they will need to sustain their families. Now, a variety of special issues arise in marriages between people from different countries. Obviously, it is a pro also, but it is a con also. It can lead to more divorce rate, including there are a lot of issues related to citizenship, whether you will be citizen of this country or I will be citizen of your country. Then it will add to a lot of complexity. There will be difference in culture, whether your children will belong to this culture or that culture. There will be a lot of challenges to these kind of relationships, and these are emerging for the first time in our lifetimes. Never used to happen earlier. Obviously, there are example of Helen and Chandragupta Maurya, but that is separate issue. In too many instances, the march to globalization also meant the marginalization of women and girls, and all that must change. So Hillary Clinton said that globalization may we have taken the men forward, but women and girls unfortunately have left behind, which is true to a certain extent. The opportunities created are not equal by any stretch of imagination, and that is why we need to do that. Now, there are a lot of myths associated about globalization. Various people think it is of as evil, but those people who really make profit out of it, they think it is the best thing that has ever happened to planet Earth. So, no discussion of globalization can be complete without discussing some myths and let them be destroyed. Downward pressure on wages. Globalization is very rarely the main factor that will foster the wage moderation in low skilled workforce in developed countries. This is mainly because of robots and mechanization, and as more and more work can be mechanized, and as lesser and lesser people are needed to do a given job, the demand for that labor will obviously go down, and as a result the prevailing wages will also go down for the labor. I think this is pretty straightforward. Instead of globalization, you should rather blame mechanization or robots, but that is also needed because it produces faster and cheaper, so at the end of the day consumers benefit. Second is the race to the bottom. Globalization has not caused the world's MNCs to simply scour the globe in search of the lowest paid laborers. This is not the way MNCs function. This is a very big myth associated with them. So there are obviously lots and lots of factors that enter into corporate decisions, from where to source products, including the supply of skilled labor, economic stability, political stability. Obviously, the country has to be that, right? Otherwise, they can lose their investment. Local infrastructure, quality of institutions, overall business climate, everything they look into before making a decision. Now, in an open global market, the jurisdictions to compete with each other to attract investment, and this completion incorporate factors which are well beyond just the hourly wage rate. Nor it is true that MNCs make a consistent practice of operating sweatshops in low wage countries. Obviously, this is what the your basically they'll show that a lot of laborers are working for 20 hours a day and MNCs are not paying them, and the work conditions are very poor. Especially they show it in China, and they are given substandard wages. This is not true at all. MNCs usually are very ethical when it comes to these domains. Now, while isolated examples of this can surely be uncovered, obviously there will be some examples of it. I am talking about by and large. You can't be making a myth out of it. It is well established that MNCs on average they pay higher wages than what is standard in developing nations and offer highest form of labor standards. Okay. Then globalization is irreversible. No, this is not. But for significant period of time, its momentum can be hindered by a variety of factor. Let's say tomorrow India says no FDI is allowed, nothing can be done, and availability of infrastructure also. So world was thought to be on a irreversible path towards peace and prosperity until the outbreak of World War One. Okay, and then there was Great Depression, then there was World War Two. So in many ways, we are still trying to recover the momentum that was lost over 90 years. So that fragility of nearly a century ago still exists today, as you see on 9/11. Then there was halt, complete financial markets shut down, economy weakened. So just remember that everything is not irreversible, nothing is irreversible except time. Open to globalization will on its own deliver economic growth. This is wrong. Just integrating is not sufficient. You have to make it work. You have to you have to remove the corrupt political class. You have to improve your infrastructure. Macroeconomic stability has to be there. Then the shrinking states. So technologies that facilitate economy and commerce have curbed the power of some despots throughout the world, but the globalized world governments take on new importance in one critical aspect with respect to contracts, property rights, etc. So the idea of globalization shrinking states obviously is wrong, because states are not shrinking and their power is same. Thank you for watching this lesson. Hey guys, what's up? So we are discussing a lot of important evergreen social issues. We have covered the gender issues, women empowerment, and now we are dealing with the globalization. We have covered the pros and cons of globalization. We have dispelled the myths associated with globalization. We have seen the scope of globalization and so on and so forth. And in this part, we will see the future of globalization, how the globalization is going to evolve, how are we going to respond, how is India prepared to do that, how is the world prepared to do that, and what will be the outcome of globalization eventually. So whenever you talk about future of globalization, I always think of this quote by Kofi Annan. Okay, so we have to choose between a global market driven only by calculations of short term profit and one which has a human face. Okay, so try to choose one with the human face. Always think of us as humans first and then profit making machines later on. So don't think about short term profit that much. This is the message to various companies, multinational corporations. So, like a snowball rolling down a steep mountain, globalization seems to be gathering more and more momentum. So, just right like an avalanche, it is growing. And the question, which is a lot of time asked about globalization, is not that whether it will continue or not. Everybody knows that globalization is here to stay. and unless something drastic happened like World War III, globalization will continue. But then the important question becomes that globalization is continuing, but what will be the pace? Will it be more? Will it be the same? Whether it will slow down, etc. Now, various disparate set of factors, different set of factors will dictate the future direction of globalization, where it is going to go. But one important entity, sovereign government, should never be overlooked, because it is the sovereign governments which are sovereign. Sovereign in the truest sense of the word means they are not dependent on anyone. Tomorrow, not any country can become North Korea and shut down everything. Okay, they still have the power to erect significant obstacles to globalization. For example, China can say that Facebook is banned, so tomorrow India can also say Facebook is banned, right? Government is making its own Facebook. Now it ranges from tariffs to countervailing duty to anti-dumping duty and whatnot to like military hostilities, etc. And nearly a century ago, global economy basically operated in a very open environment with goods, services, and people. They were able to move across the borders with little or if any difficulty. Okay, but now we will see a lot of difficulties are there. You have to get visa and whatnot. So that openness began to wither away with rise of nationalism with the onset of World War I in 1940, and lots of things got lost between these 30 years between 1914 to 1945. And in this year you see a lot of global depression going on. You see World War I going on. You see World War II. People didn't trust each other. There was army, there was wars and whatnot. So government basically in these 30 years recognized the importance of international cooperation and coordination, because they knew that without the cooperation and coordination nothing can happen and there will again be a war, and we need to connect every country to each other economically. It led to the emergence of numerous international organizations and financial institutions, and it includes the IMF, World Bank in 1944. So the lessons here include that avoid fragmentation, avoid isolationism, and avoid the breakdown of cooperation, rather promote the cooperation among nations. And the world is still made up of nation states and a global marketplace, and the sovereign government has their own role to play. But we need to get the right rules in place so that the global system is much more resilient, it is more beneficial and more legitimate. So basically all the international institutions, we have a very difficult but an indispensable role in helping to bring more of globalization benefits to more people throughout the world. So that should be the goal of these international organizations. Now, by helping to break down these barriers, what are these barriers? They range from regulations to the cultural barriers. More countries basically they can be integrated into the global economy, and more people can seize more of the benefits of globalization. Now globalization is an ongoing process. नहीं कि globalization is done हो गया, ऐसा नहीं, no. And there is it is linking people, neighborhoods, cities, regions, etc. And they're also linking countries which are much more closer together than they have ever been before. For example, European Union is a typical example of globalization. In just 70 years ago, France and Germany were fighting each other. Now there is virtually there is no border between France and Germany. Now there is also interconnectedness among the humans on the planet. This is also called as a global village. In Hindi also there is a phrase called as Sanskrit rather Vasudev Kutumbakam. So here the barriers of national, international boundaries become less relevant. World is a smaller place. Figuratively, you can go anywhere. The process is basically Vasudev Kutumbakam means the entire world is one family. So it is driven economically by international financial flows and trade, technologically by IT, mass media entertainment, very significantly by very human means like cultural exchanges, migration, international tourism, etc. So we feel like we are in a networked world just like internet. So what this has resulted is that it has resulted in our lives being intertwined with people in all the parts of the world via the food we eat, because we eat the same burger, we eat the same pizza. So my grandfather did not know that there is something called as burger, there is something called as pizza. He did not know a word in English. He did not know there is a country called as USA. But now I have been there. So just in 20-30 years you can see what difference it can make. The clothing we wear, the music we listen to, the information we get, the ideas we hold, everything is different. Other countries have not done so well. For example, a large part of the population, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, has been left behind by the economic progress. So there is a huge disparity between the world's richest and the poorest countries. They are wider than ever before, and there is increasing incidence of poverty within the countries. So poverty is obviously unacceptable on moral grounds, but it also forms the breeding grounds for war and terrorism. People are dissatisfied, they take up arms. So the greatest challenge to the 21st century peace and stability is that we should get rid of poverty. And reversing the process of globalization will obviously not solve the problem of poverty, because the poverty was much more in 20th century than in the this century. Now the worlds need a new approach to globalization that exploits its enormous potential for improving human welfare. Please remember this line. World needs a new approach to globalization that exploits its enormous potential for improving human welfare. We need to carry forward the process. We need to build support for better globalization, common political understanding, how to maximize the benefits, minimize the risk. And greatest asset is obviously Bretton Woods institution, IMF and World Bank, because they have the membership of over 180 countries and mutual respect and trust is there. Both the institutions also recognize need for change, internal reforms. IMF has implemented many reforms in recent years, designed to strengthen its cooperative nature, improve its ability to serve its members. And the potential of globalization can never be realized unless there are rules and regulations in place and individuals to enforce them. Ultimately, poor countries, weaker sections should not be poor due to the fruits of globalization, and it should not be just limited to the elite section of the society. It has to be balanced for the future of the world that should be peaceful and warless. So Kofi Annan said, if globalization is to succeed, it must succeed for poor and rich alike. It deliver rights no less than riches. Okay, it must provide social justice and equity no less than economic prosperity and enhanced communication. So thank you for watching this course.